I let a couple of my buddies that work for Noah Gas's team borrow it. And I won't name any names, but Cody, Cordell, and Robbie, if you're watching this, thanks. But it came back in 2 pieces. So
from Mooresville, Indiana, he drives the Daystar Directional Drilling, Edco General Contractors, Collision Concepts, BooyahDarts.com 35. It's Zach Hampton.
I'm sure there's going to be a few things that I forgot, but like I got some body panels out, nerf bars. We've got our headers here. I've got some shocks, our Zeus buttons, stuff for the top wing. This goes with the radiator down here. Our spacers for the rear. Wheels and tires, nose wing stuff. Some of the tools we're going to need. Rock guard, nose wing. I got a top wing out over there. We got some of the tires out. I just got to grab the fronts. Got our water out for the radiator. So we've got a good amount of stuff here we're going to do. And I don't have any idea what order we're going to do it in, but I'm going to start with the radiator. I know that. And then I'm just going to start kind of hitting stuff as I want to. So the first step is going to be, I don't really know what, like, I've heard this called a few things, but I think for the most part, it's like an air dam kind of. But this is going to block a good portion of the radiator. But we'll go ahead and throw this in first. You got to turn the axle because the tie rod's kind of in the way. So, let me turn that any more. There we go. So that goes like that. We'll straighten our axle back up. And then this just goes in with 2 Zeus buttons. And almost all my Zeuses are black, except for these ones here. I just use silver ones because they kind of blend in better with this being silver. A lot of these that I have are powder coated. But recently, like, especially now that I'm racing more on just my money and money I can get, I've just not been powder coating things. So we've got that in. The next step is this bad boy, and this is going to hold the radiator in. So it's got 4 Zeus buttons. I'll Zeus these in, and then I'll bring the camera over to the side and kind of show you. All right, so you can see right there and right there. So, and the other side's the exact same. Yeah, you guys can see that, right? 2 Zeus buttons there. Other side's the exact same. Next, all my radiators, I don't have any brand new ones that aren't done, so I'll show you guys, but you're going to honeycomb this side that's going to be to the front, and that's to save your fins on the radiator. So there's a lot of ways to do it. They make these like, they're almost like zip ties, but they have like these rings or whatever on the backside, and they go through this. It goes through the fins. It doesn't damage it, and you can do that. Or like I cut it out perfect, and then you can see the silicone. It's like that all the way around. And then my breather tube here. On this one, I ended up drilling a hole and zip tying. But a lot of mine, actually, no, this has it too. It's actually silicone all the way down as well. And then these are like a safety measure in case the silicone rips off. But we've got dash 8s on both of the outside. And then because a couple of my motors had dash 6s, I actually have this little piece. This is a dash 6 under here, and then this is a dash 6 to dash 4 fitting. So I run those so that, like, if I put the dash 6 in, obviously I can take this fitting off and have the dash 6 on there instead of having to take the whole fitting out. So we can slide this down in. Maybe we can. There we go, get past the foam. Not sure what I'm caught on there. There we go. Right. So, got our radiator slid down in. So, next step is going to be putting on our lines. So now we can grab a 7/8. Got our 7/8 for dash 8 lines. (9/16). Anyone wondering why I have all these taped is because I have all my wrenches color coded, so I don't even have to look at, like, I don't have to grab a wrench and look and see what size it is. I just know the color. So there's those. The next thing we are going to put on is our lower radiator hose, which is going to go from here to here. So I run a coupler style, right? So that's why you see these two here. They do make some where, like, I believe I'd have to measure, but basically this fuel or this water pump. Yeah, so this is 1 3/4, right? As you can see, this is bigger around than this. So they make somewhere like this is 1 3/4 and this is 1.5 inches, and it's already like whatever formed and all that. But I just like using this coupler deal because I can twist everything exactly how I want it. As every single one, every radiator, every pump here is just a little bit different. So that's what I like to use. All right, so we've got all of our lines on the radiator there. So I'm going to explain another way that I know you can do the put water in and make sure that you don't have any air pockets. No matter what, when you first fire off a motor after putting it in and putting water in it, you're going to want to, like after I do engine heat, right? Or really, I'm not going to do engine heat. I'm going to fire this thing off, let it run, get some temp just at the shop before I ever go to the racetrack. And then when it cools down, I'll check this because it will have worked out any bubbles, right? So I might need to top this off, but this is going to get you really close. Option number one, which I'm not going to do it this way, but you can jack up the front of your car just a little bit, and then you'll crack like your small, so my -4 water line, but I'm going to crack it at the head back here, and I'm just going to barely, I just need to loosen up the line just a little bit, and then you'll dump water, and eventually you'll see it kind of start to come out where the line's cracked. So once you see that, you tighten that up, and then you come to the next point where it's on the head, you crack that loose. When you see water come out, you're good, and then you crack it right here, and when you see a little bit of water come out, tighten it, and you're good. And then you just top up, make sure like it's full or whatever, right? And that's going to help it, whatever, get the air bubbles out. The way I do it is I'm not going to put water wetter in this because it would go to waste. I'm going to drain this water tomorrow or, in a few days because this motor's coming out and going in the other car. So I just cut the bottom off an old water wetter, whatever, container thing. And then I tape it so that it creates, and actually this one needs a little more tape. So I'm going to create a seal right there, but then that gives me a funnel as well. All right, so I added tape and I ended up with a little bit too much. It didn't want to quite fit, so I took some off and I just took it off until that creates a nice seal. So what I then do is I do crack my line right here. And I'm actually going to change my mind. I'm not even going to dump water in this right now because I don't need to explain this part, right? So, and I don't want to just waste 2 gallons of perfectly good water. So I crack my dash 4 lines here when I do this, right? So as you can see, they're just a little bit loose. So there's actually, I'm going to loosen it up enough you can see, and I think I can zoom in a little bit here. So you can see if I can hold this steady, this little dot here, that's like a little whatever breather deal. That's where the water is going to come out. So I'm just going to leave these just cracked, right? And then I already know that this is like airtight, other than obviously there's a big hole here. But once I start dumping water, right, it's airtight. So I'll dump water in this until I see it start to drip out of here. And then I can tighten these up and pull this off, or just look down and see if I'm all the way at the top, and I might add a little bit extra. So, but when I go to fill this, I usually go, I'll put 1 of these containers of water wetter in. I don't know how many ounces this is. 12 fluid ounces. So I'll go 1 water wetter, and then I do a gallon of water, and then I do another 1 of these, and then I add water until full. And then, like I said, once you're done, once you've fired off and got heat in the motor, all that, and you shut it down and it cools off, obviously let it cool off before you go trying to take a radiator cap off. But once that cools off, you're going to pull the cap back off, and no matter how you fill this, you're going to end up needing to add some. So, but that is installing the radiator. One thing I'll show you guys, I have one. I don't often run it. I know a lot of guys do. This one is made by All Star, but a lot of companies make them. So how this works is my 2 Zeus buttons in here, I actually just pulled them out. And this I would have to trim down because of how my nose, or my nose scoop goes on, right? But that actually goes down and Zeus's in with that. And then some of these they even make where they have, I guess, what's that? I can't think of what they're called. They're like the little buttons you can, push on and pull off. And I don't know why I can't think of that word, but either way. And then you can put an outerwear on this. So some guys run those like instead of honeycomb, but I prefer that. So the next thing we're going to do here, let's put headers on, right? So we're going to take our exhaust covers off. That one's finger tight. That one is too. I figured they'd all be tight, but we'll go ahead and take these off. We've got brand new Kinetic gaskets on here. One thing I'll say, I've heard that you're supposed to keep so this set of gaskets, whatever, they're brand new. So whatever set of headers I put on here, I'm going to end up leaving these gaskets with those set of headers. It's probably not a huge deal. You tighten them down, but they say that they could just, even if they're the same headers, could be a little bit off, whatever. So that's what I do with these. But I know when I had Rob Hart working with me, he actually would just put a few little dabs of silicone on these and put them on when he's going to tighten the headers down. And that way, when you take the header off, this doesn't fall off or whatever, right? So I will say that's kind of nice, but I just prefer to keep my gaskets with their respective set of headers. So actually, you know what? I'm actually going to do Nerf bars next because I don't want to have to fight putting these in on the Nerf bar when the header's on there. That would not be a wise decision. So we'll go ahead and just start with the front bumper. So some front bumpers don't have this whole top part in these, right? It's just that bottom loop. I like to run this. This is more of it's going to help protect your nose wing some and just help if you do have someone, whatever, check up kind of in front of you or whatever, like these can help a lot. So you'll see some guys with this and you'll see some with just the loop. These are, again, Smith titanium. I do have a bunch of steel ones. They're just like, I want to say they're 1032s, but these are really nice because they have just like, you only need that much thread, right? So some guys, and we're probably going to have to ream this out. I don't know which car this front bumper originally got mounted on, and they can all be just a touch different. You don't want to have to force these in. So one thing, I'm not making a new set of, or I don't have a new set of Nerf bars to show you guys, but what I like to do, I lied, these are 3/16 because I use a 3/16 drill bit, right? So when I have a brand new one, I'll get it all the way in, whatever, and then I drill from the top and from the bottom. I don't try to go all the way through because you're probably not going to end up lined up. So I do that, and then I pull the Nerf bar back off, whether it's a bumper, rear, or I guess some guys call those like kick. I don't know, they call them kick something, or something kicks. I don't know. But I pull it back off, and then I go 1/64th, just not in the frame, but in the Nerf bar itself. I'll go so if I use a 3/16, that's what, 12/64ths. So I'll use like a 13/64ths or maybe a 7/32 drill bit, and I'll drill out the bumper itself so that it's got a bigger hole. And then I go through on the inside with a Dremel and make sure to clean the burrs up. And that way my bolt, it always makes it to where the Nerf bar can kind of rattle just a bit. But if we damage one and we are changing it in the work area or whatever, it'll come out way easier. So some guys run pins where instead of a bolt, right? It's more of it's a pin similar, right? They're similar to these. They're just thinner and longer, but they run those instead of a bolt. And that way you don't have to get wrenches to change a Nerf bar. I just still run bolts. All right. So I'm going to let Justin fast forward through everything. A few of these, like I said, I got to ream out. But I'm going to let Justin just fast forward through me putting the front, sides, and rear Nerf bars on. So one thing I'll note, if you don't use a 33-gallon tank like I do, you should actually run your bolt. I could probably do it on the top, right? Where my bolt comes from the back, but down here I can't. I would have to put this on first. But if you're on a 28-gallon, you'll have room, and maybe even with a 30, I'm not sure, but I feel like with a 30 you would too. Run them this way, and that way, if you got to take this out in a hurry, the problem with me is, if this gets damaged, is I can't hit, right? I can't take the nut off and hit it out. So if you put them backwards, I'll probably put my top ones backwards, but the bottoms I can't. And that'll save you a lot of time, whether it's in the work area or in the shop. This one I thought I just threw a nut away because I thought the nut was no good, but as you can see, this has got a big chew in it. And you probably can't see, but the threads are all boogered up. So we're going to grab a different one. There we go. Luckily, I've got plenty of spares. So the reason you saw me use a hammer a little bit, I don't, really love it, but I wasn't beating on them. Like sometimes you could probably just tap it like with a wrench. It just needs like the metal to vibrate or just a touch of persuasion. And the reason I didn't drill it how I told you guys that I do is because I already have, like the hole's already bigger. But like every single car, that hole might be just a little bit different. So taking it off and drilling to a bigger hole size isn't going to fix it. It needed to be lined up with the hole in the frame. So that's why I did it that way there, is because I already did it the other way the first time. I just wanted a little bit more in a certain direction to go onto this car versus maybe that gray car was probably what they were on. Or they could have been on this black car, but I kind of doubt it. I've kept those separate. So now that we've got those on, we can do our headers. So one thing I'll show you guys, I don't have a set out that aren't, but these are a set with mufflers on them. I know I'm going to be going to Knoxville first, at least most likely. So that's why I'm putting the mufflers on. They're required there. Probably like 30 or 40% of the tracks, they're required. So unfortunately, the cars don't sound as good, obviously. But that's what we have to run there. So if the non-muffler ones, you actually just end up like this straight piece. You don't have this welded. This slips over and then welds around. So it'll come back. They're usually not quite as long. And you'll see guys with all sorts of different lengths. But it's just straight. All right, so a couple things to note. You might be able to see me mess with this a little bit. I don't know how fast forward it'll go or whatever, but this has got a little indent here, right? And that's so that you can get to that nut. And this, when I put it on, it kind of rotated up a little bit. So it wasn't lined up. So I had to loosen that up, push it back down. So the reason I've got one of these on this side and not on the other side is the other side, as I mentioned earlier, I run lower panels, and here I don't. So it's really closed up over there. So I don't really need to protect the spark plugs because there's already body around it. So if I know I'm going to a place that's particularly rocky or I'm going to be super heavy or, like I feel like is got potential to go through the fiberglass, I will run one of these on the right side. But I usually don't mess with it if I'm going to a place like Knoxville. It's so nice. There's no rocks. There's, none of that. So, but this is protecting the spark plug so I don't break one. There's all sorts of things. I saw Geo has some pretty slick, like covers that mount to the exhaust here and covers his nozzle lines even. And then they would run something, maybe not this exactly, but something in that manner. So, not going to torque these. It's pointless. Once I get heat in the motor and this actually, like the heads are actually warm or hot, these will get torqued at 25. So like these come off every week. So at the track, like we'll fire off for engine heat. We'll have the engine heater on it for a while. And then when we go for engine heat, we really get it up to temp. Once I turn the engine off, I or someone that's helping me will go through and torque these at 25. But torque them when it's cold just isn't going to do anything because as soon as that heats up, especially the new gaskets, it's going to sandwich a bunch. So we've got our headers on now. The one thing I'm not going to put in, I can't put in, is a seat in this car. And that's because I kind of spaced it or whatever. But The seat that goes in this car is actually in the Silver Crown car that I ran at 4 Crown at the end of last year. And I've still got to go. That guy's shop, Brad Armstrong, his shop's like an hour away. So it's not much for me to go get it, but I'm not going to, I'm not doing it today. So the seat's not going to go in it. That's 4 bolts. Everyone jokes those are the 4 quickest bolts to come out of the car usually when there's a problem. So that's not going to go in there, but we'll keep plugging away. Let's go ahead and put our rock guard on. We've got metal clamps that are going to do the side, and then this top one I just use like a hose clamp because it's not holding the rock screen in. It's really just kind of holding it back, so you don't need anything too terribly beefy. I've seen guys who, instead of using these metal ones, will just use hose clamps, and I do not suggest it. I've had a couple scares. My life flashed before my eyes. Even with these metal clamps, I had one this is going to sit on the front, and I had, a rock or a caliper, someone's caliper, hit so hard it actually spun these around and bent the rock screen all the way in. So don't mess around and use hose clamps. I want to say a set of these is $30. So just get these and do it right. The last thing you want is a rock or someone's caliper that falls off or some other part to come through and go through your helmet and smash your skull in. All right, so there's our rock guard. As you saw, I put this hose clamp on first. That's not something you have to run, but I do. And it's a lot easier if I just kind of loosely put that on, and then it kind of holds the rock screen for me. I'm not trying to put these on, whatever, and reach across with my little arms. We're going to go ahead and put our nose scoop on. All right, so this body is very much beat up, but the spare car gets the worst body since it'll just be sitting upstairs. So I do have some other nose scoops. I might eventually put one on, just have to see how many I really have. But for now, it's getting the one that's been on it. So your nose wings are going to mount on these little tabs that are on your shock tower. Everyone's are a little bit different. Some people don't have a small tab like this. It's more of a bung, so you're going to need a longer bolt. But this is, the style I wanted and had them put on. And then your posts are going to go in here. And I had to rob this nose wing off that car because I'm about to order new nose wings, but I currently just have the one. These are the posts. I actually had some on that were already drilled and whatnot, but I went ahead and just grabbed a new set that I already had so I can show you guys how to do this. And then these are the sideboard straps, so our bolts are in it so that we don't lose them. Same thing with this. And there's a little bit more to the nose wing than might show, or you might think. It's not just putting these on, especially when you're putting new post on. So we'll go ahead and get our post in. Well, first we'll do the sideboard straps. All right, so for now, you'll see why in a minute, but those are actually going to stay a little bit loose. And then these, I'm actually drawing a blank. I can't remember if I need to be on the inside or outside. Might be one of both, but we're just going to go inside. All right, we're going to leave that pretty loose for now too. we got all those loosely on. So we're going to go ahead and slide right. So I think I'm remembering now, I'm actually like inside outside on these wings. All right, so I actually just barely snugged those up for now. And the next thing we're going to do, we're not going to tighten them, but we're going to put them in loosely. There's our sideboard straps here. Oh, let me just throw that. Got butterfingers right now. All right, so just so it can't go anywhere. One thing I want to note, if you do run this style, there's a lot of different styles of nose wing post here. So some guys have this where it's like angled, right? And then they run a straight post. I would say these are probably the most common. Some guys just use this style that like has a clamp here and then it comes to the sideboard, or it can come there, but like it clamps here. I have a set of those that's a spare, like it's made up on a spare nose wing. And that's so like if one of these gets ripped off, you can put that on in a hurry. So, but these are the style I run. And what I wanted to say is they're probably going to come like 11 or 12 inches if you set this on a bench, right? So that the straight part's going up. And if you measured off the bench to the center of the hole, it's probably going to be like 11 inches. Now, every car is going to be a little bit different, but mine I end up cutting is 9 3/4. So, like I said, I set the flat part of the post on the bench, so the post ends up going like this, and then I measure off the bench to the center of my hole, and I'm 9 3/4. So, as far as like this height, I guess I don't know what it is because that's not how I normally measure my nose wing, but it looks like you're going to be about 10 1/2. So cut your post however you need to be about 10 1/2 from like the top of the frame rail to the bottom of your nose wing. And I don't know if that's 100% right. This is just how I've always done it, and how, you know, like even when I had Rob Hart, that's the length we went, and he was happy with it. So I know it's somewhat right. So the next thing we're going to do is these actually, to get this bolt in, it ends up, we drill a notch in this, and that keeps it from being able to pull out. It also pinches it, but really it's, even if the bolt was loose and didn't come out, like this can't come up out. So I did have a really nice tool that isn't quite a drill bit. It's like a reaming tool, and it was specifically for that. But I let a couple of my buddies that work for Noah Gass's team borrow it, and I won't name any names, but Cody, Cordell, and Robbie, if you're watching this, thanks. But it came back in 2 pieces, so we're going to struggle through with the drill bit because I haven't ordered a new one yet. So the reason I've got it on this little 90, I don't need it, but this 90's got a smaller head than the drill, and it's really close to the frame rail. So this is going to make my life a little bit easier. One important thing to note when you go to do this is you're going to do both from the same side, even though one side it seems wrong or weird, because when you spin this drill bit, right, and it's trying to drill that, it's going to want you need to go to where it pulls it down and not pushes it up. Otherwise, you're going to just mark the whole thing up and not drill in. So you're going to want to come from this side, and that way, as the drill bit spins, right, it's pulling down. Looks like I need to tighten that a bit more. All right, just like so. I'm going to grab our bolts. All right, you want that to be nice and free. So, like I said, this side is going to feel wrong coming at it from the direction I'm going to, but I need the drill bit to pull down. Nice and free. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten these. Now comes when I said there's a little bit more to the nose wing than meets the eye. This is the most miserable part of new nose wing posts. So I've got a tape measure here, and I've got a plumb bob. So from the edge, like the front of our axle here, to the front of the nose wing, you can't be further ahead than 20 inches. And they had to implement that rule because back in the day, guys realized that the further ahead that was, the more it would keep the nose on the ground and made the cars really good. So guys were getting their nose wings, as far out as they could, and it was just causing chaos. So this rule's been around forever, way longer than I've been doing it. So, but yeah, so they'll come by and check at the beginning of the night, and then if they somehow miss you and you run the race and it's not at 20 inches, or if it's further out than 20 inches, you'll get disqualified. So I like to get mine to 19 3/4. So that's not the case. Obviously, if your nose ring gets ripped off and it's not even on properly, but it ends up further out, they're not going to disqualify you because you're actually at a disadvantage if the thing's all mangled and sitting on, barely on there anymore. So but the way we do this, we've got that, and now what we can do, right, and I'll show you guys. New ones, at least on my cars, just how, where everything's at, always ends up super long. So, right, we're at a strong 21, maybe just a tick over. And then just so I know, we come over here, right, and see on this side, we're really close, like 20 and an eighth. So this isn't going to need much. For whatever reason, that other one seems to be a lot more bent. Well, let's say we're 20 1/4, right? So I need to go back about a half inch on that to be at 19 3/4 and just give myself a little safety. And then on that side, we're going to go back 1 1/4 inches. So it's hard to even tell. Like if you just looked at the front, I mean, you can see that it's not quite straight, but you would never guess it's that far different. So the reason we left these loose is the easiest way to do this. Right, so the easiest way is to take that off, and the reason I bolted these in is so that they're nice and tight. Like that's always going to be where it is. So what I like to do is, I know this needs to move 1 1/4 inches, and I'm probably still going to have to put that on and take it off 1 or 2 more times. That's why everyone hates this so much. but I just measure from the front of my shock tower to the center of my hole, and I'm 14 and a quarter. And I know I want to go back 1.25 inches, so if I can get that hole to 13, I should be really close. This side, we only want to go 1/2 inch, and the shock towers aren't always, like, they're not dead even, right? So I'm like maybe a 16th under 14 and a quarter here. So if I go like a 16th under 13 3/4 here, then I should be really close to 19 3/4 on both sides. So if you've got something else like a long, bar that's really, sturdy and not going to bend, you can use that. But what we almost always have at the racetrack when they come by and go, oh, that's, got to go back 1/4 inch or whatever, is the wheel wrench. So I'm just going to slip that over it. And I probably barely moved that at all because I weigh 110 pounds soaking wet. Yeah, so that got us almost a 1/2 inch. It's easier when the car's in the pit area on the ground on wheels and tires, and I can put it in gear and it's not going to move. Felt it move a lot there. Still got a ways to go. All right, so I went to go look if I had something better to do this, but everything I have that's got a big enough inside diameter is pretty short. All right, we're going to try that. All right, so on this side, we ended up like 19 9/16. We're just in between, obviously, 1/2 and 5/8. And on that side, we were right in between 3/4 and 7/8. So I need to get this. I was pretty happy with. I didn't quite have a quarter, but I probably had about 3/16 to spare. So let's see here. If I went 1, 2, I'm counting ticks because I don't feel like doing math. It's getting late. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so like a quarter-ish of an inch back forward. There we go. You can see, kind of. Well, probably not from the angle or whatever, but we're right at 19 3/4. We're maybe like a 16th or 32nd off. So it's good enough for who it's for. We're going to tighten all of our bolts up. All the bolts that hold the nose wing on, not on the frame, but all the bolts that hold the post here and the sideboard straps on, I actually always leave a smidge loose, like as the spare ones. And that way, everything can kind of spin freely when you go to put it on. So if you need to kind of spin the nose wing forward, backwards, whatever, you're able to do that. And then I tighten them all up like these, right? We left loose. So if you do that, just always remember to tighten these after you're done. And these should definitely be part of your nightly bolt check before you get going. One thing, like most nose wings come where it's going to be a 1/4 inch bolt in here and there, these will be the same, right? Like actually, I think most of these come a quarter, but that tab comes 5/16. But there's guys who run 1/4 inch bolts here, but if you're running a 305 or 360, it's probably fine. But like even if I was in a 360 at Knoxville, I'm putting 5/16 on. So like I have to drill all my nose wings out. Like this hole here will be a 1/4 inch, so I have to drill it out up there where the post is as well. And I ran 1/4 inch bolts one time and my nose wing like fell off. The bolt was gone. So I've never had a bolt fall out there. It could have been loose, but I think it broke. It was a 1/4 inch. It was a steel one. And you just don't want that to happen. So the other thing you might have instead of these sideboard straps is you can see these 3 holes here and you can see this tab, right, with the 3 rivets. You can put that tab here, and some nose wings you can even order where it's already got like a little tab in there, and then you run a straight whatever piece, like your strap here is straight. So those are probably a little bit more convenient as far as like if you're moving the nose wing angle up and down, but it leaves your sideboard kind of weak. So the other couple things I didn't touch because we weren't building a new nose wing is you can see because the dirt sticks to it and then you can't clean it off. But on the top part, all the way down to about here, is siliconed, right? And that's so that the air can't like come in and try to whatever. So even though it's all riveted on, you silicone that top part and that keeps the air from getting in there. Doesn't matter as much on the back, but I go just a little bit around the back. The other thing, I know with my post height and being in this hole that my degree will be right. And you can start playing with it more, like, but in the beginning, or, what's the most standard is your angle of your nose wing here, like on top of the sideboard, you want to match the angle here. So I'm not going to check it because I know that's where I want it. And that's right. And I'm probably a little bit less, but that's usually 27 degrees. So I know I'm a little less. I'm probably like 25. And that's because I'm going to Knoxville. So I don't want this thing stood up and acting as a parachute. I want it a little bit flatter. So that is the nose wing. I need to take a pause here. But yeah, we got a lot on in this whatever part of the video. So I'm going to do a pause and save. And then I'll be back in a few and we're going to do body panels, shocks, and then wheels and tires. And then we're going to set the car down on the ground. And I'm going to let you guys laugh at me as I put a top wing on by myself. I've done it a bunch of times. If you watched any of my stuff on Twitter, there's a time lapse of it. It's a struggle, but as long as I get the car down on the ground and get it a little bit lower, it's not too bad.